everybody, it's Mel. Thank you so much for joining me today for May's reading wrap up, as well as my Diversify Me game for May and some stats. So two things to address quickly before I actually do the wrap up and all the things I just mentioned. First of all, we're combining them all today because May ended up becoming quite busy, and so I didn't read as much, so I don't have as many things to talk about. And then second of all, I apologise for the somewhat unkempt look. I have COVID. I'm actually feeling okay at the moment. I haven't been super sick. I just have been feeling kind of meh. And I haven't been bothered to put on makeup and, you know, kind of try and get dressed up and look nice, which is what I usually do when I'm filming. So, but anyway, that's where we are. So in May, I ended up picking up a contract for 3 days a week, teaching a grade 2-3 class, which has been absolutely fantastic, and I have really, really enjoyed it. But it's been very, very busy, and a lot of stuff has been going on with the class, and it's kind of felt very much like there's a lot of information we've been given, myself and my co-teacher. It feels very much like a hit the ground running straight into a huge sprint. So yeah, my reading just took a mega backseat. I find that I don't read as much on days when I work anyway. I'm usually fairly tired when I get home, and I just don't have the energy a lot of the time to read. And then add to that the fact that I haven't had as much time because I've been working more to do reading and also content. So you may have noticed in my community tab and also over on my Twitter, all that information is always down below should you wish to follow me on social media. But anyway, you may have noticed that I've decided to go back to 1 video a week for the next 6 weeks for the remainder of this term, because I haven't had as much time to read, so I have sort of less content to make, but then I also haven't had as much time to film, and it's not so much time, although obviously that, but also I just find, like I said, I'm getting used to that kind of pace of work, and it's been a lot to take in, and it's just been very tiring. And so when I do have time, I don't necessarily feel like filming or editing or even reading. So yeah, that happened in May, which slowed everything down, and it's going to continue to be a bit slower. But anyway, we're here to talk about May's reading and stats and my Diversify game, so you really probably don't need to hear any more about that. But just know it's all good, it's just all busy. Another thing to mention is that because I have COVID, I won't be grabbing all the books off the bookshelf. I'm probably being a little bit over the top here, but I don't want to end up feeling like all my books have to be in quarantine. So yeah, we're just going to have images on the screen for all the books, regardless of how I read them. So let's actually do stats first, because we're combining it all. I might as well do that. As you guys know, I am not a super big stats nerd, and so I tend to it's fairly quick. Sorry if I don't go into as much depth as you may like if you are interested in stats, but anyway, here's all the stats that I've been keeping. In the month of May, I read 4 books. I read 1,173 pages, which was those 4 books. I did, however, read a couple of books that I didn't finish, so I did read actually more than that in page count, but those are the books I finished. I had 1 LGBTQIA+ book. I had 1 book by a BIPOC author, and that BIPOC author was an Indigenous Australian author, so that was 1 Aboriginal Australian author. I didn't read any ARCs in May. 3 of the 4 that I read were adult, and 1 was a new adult. For a genre breakdown, I read 1 science fiction and 1 dystopian, so kind of 2 science fiction, 1 fantasy and 1 magical realism. For a star breakdown, I didn't have any 1 star, 1.5 star, 2 star, 2.5 star, 3 star, or 3.5 star. I did have 2 4-star books and 1 4.5 stars and 1 5-star, which is very exciting. So even though I didn't read a lot, it was still a really fantastic reading month from the point of view of quality and enjoyment, so that's really exciting. My average rating for stars was 4.375, so like I said, a really high quality. And for core pile, that is 7.965. So again, pretty high really for core pile. So that's all the stats that I need to talk to you about. Now we'll do the wrap up and then we'll do the game last, like I said. So yeah, that's how we're going to do it. Okay, so the first book that I read in the month of May was Generations, which was a Firefly novel written by Tim Lebbon, or Lebbon. So Firefly is a TV show created by Joss Whedon, which I absolutely love. It only had one season, unfortunately, before it was cancelled, and I'm definitely a brown coat for anyone that knows what that means. Definitely a brown coat. It is a fantastic TV show. I absolutely love it. It is a sci-fi drama set in space, and we follow the crew of Serenity, which is a spaceship, Firefly class. We follow them as they adventure through space. One of the things that happens when they are adventuring through space is they pick up some passengers, two of which are actually fugitive from the Alliance, which is an intergalactic totalitarian fascist regime, and the crew are misfits, either people who are on the wrong side of the law because they are actually criminals, or people who fought for the independence and against the Alliance in a war. And so they end up figuring out that they have these two fugitives on board, and they decide to take them with them and look after them and hide them from the Alliance. So the book is about the crew, and one of the fugitives, River Tam, was attending this very rarefied, very well-to-do school in one of the inner planets in the Alliance of planets, but it turns out that they were doing horrible experiments on her, and they have altered her brain chemistry, and no one really knows entirely what she's capable of, but she is an extremely talented assassin. She is a bit of a mind reader, and anyway, in the book they discover a map to one of the original ships that the people who left Earth on, because on Earth we destroyed our planet, climate change, etc. And so all the people escaped Earth via these giant spaceships called Generation ships, and this is a map to the Generation ship. And there is someone or something on the ship that River is really wanting to find. And that is the story, and we follow the crew and this situation as they go to try and find this Generation ship. I was very uncertain how I would feel about the book because I love the show so much, and I actually don't know whether Tim Lebbon worked on the show or whether they are someone that has been since a part of writing these stories. I probably should look into that, but I didn't. Anyway, I'm not really sure, but I was very uncertain what I would think, because sometimes when you read books that are based on shows, they don't necessarily work as a book. You just never know. But I actually really enjoyed it. I thought Tim Lebbon's writing style was really good. It was fairly simple, but not in a bad way, just, you know, fairly simple and straightforward. But he definitely got his point across. Like I said, I don't know if he's worked on the show, but it definitely seemed like he knew what he was talking about. He definitely knew the world of Firefly, he knew the characters, he knew how they would think, what they would do. So he's either worked on the show or is a massive fan or something. I'm assuming that these are like actually proper canon, that they are part of the story, and that, you know, it's been greenlit by Joss Whedon. So I'm assuming that he has knowledge of whatever description and that he has some idea of what he's talking about. But yeah, I really did end up enjoying it. I gave it a 7.75 in core pile, which works out to be 4 stars. So that's a pretty good rating for me. I'm finding that I'm giving quite high ratings this year, which is fantastic. And I was quite surprised by this. Like I said, it's one of my favourite shows, so I was a bit concerned about how it would translate and who this person was and who they were to tell the story. But also, sci-fi hasn't traditionally been a genre I've been super interested in, either in film or in books, but I'm definitely becoming much more interested in sci-fi as I've gotten older and realizing that there are actually some amazing storytelling in sci-fi. And I think the thing that has always drawn me to Firefly is that Buffy is one of my favourite shows. I love Joss Whedon's stories. Unfortunately, turns out Joss Whedon is a horrible person, but nonetheless I do love his stories and the way he tells his stories, and I've loved pretty much all the shows he's ever produced, but Firefly is one of my favourites. Buffy still is my favourite, but Firefly is probably, honestly, probably better. But anyway, so I'm learning that I do really like sci-fi, and this was an example of a sci-fi that I really, really enjoyed. So I'm really happy to have discovered that and to have just had a good time with it. It's just, yeah, there's some interesting concepts being discussed, interesting philosophical ideas being discussed, but overall I think that Joss Whedon's strength, and in particular the shows that he produces, strengths are the characters, and yeah, I just love the characters and they were incredibly well done in this book. They're really true, like I said, to what they were in the show, and you could see them in the characters that was portrayed in the book. So I really, really enjoyed that. So yay for that. That was Generations, a Firefly novel by Tim Lebbon. Next up we have Enclave by Clare G. Coleman. This is a dystopian book set in Australia, so I guess that's part of the sci-fi genre as well, although I don't think this is super sci-fi. I guess because it's future history, then that technically is sci-fi, even if it's not really that much of a sci-fi. Like, it's set in Australia and there's no real like amazing technological advances or time travel or space or anything like that. So we follow a young woman. She's in her early mid-20s. I've actually completely forgotten what her name is, but anyway, Christine. That's her name. So we follow Christine. She lives in the city. There is a wall around the city, and the city is very tightly controlled by the upper class. Her father is some kind of financier in the upper class, so she's very well off, but the universe that she lives in is very tightly controlled and it has very kind of old-fashioned values. So she has gone to university and has a degree, but her next step is potentially like to get married, have children. She's kind of considered not completely a second-class citizen in the same way that women were, but she's definitely not as important as men, but she can choose, and she does end up deciding to go back to university and do just plain maths. But the main thing that is important in the society is, well, two things. First of all is that she is white. All of the people that run the society are white, and then they have servants that get bussed in to the city and they're all coloured. The other thing to know is that it is not okay to be homosexual. Everyone is supposed to be straight, and that's the normal way of things. Christine starts to realise that she might be having feelings for one of her coloured. It's not explicitly stated how the person identifies other than they have dark skin, but I believe that the person is supposed to be an Indigenous Australian. So anyway, Christine starts to develop feelings for this female Indigenous Australian, and then when they act on it, she is suddenly disowned by her father, and then she starts to discover that things maybe aren't really what she thinks they are, and that the world's a bit different from what she thought. I'm not going to say anything more than that. I did enjoy this one. I actually ended up giving it 4 stars, so I did enjoy it. I thought it was well written. I thought it was interesting. I really enjoy Clare Coleman's character work. I like the way that she writes her characters. I actually didn't super like Christine, but I thought she was well written, and I thought that the tension was really well written. Didn't like it as much as I liked Terra Nullius, which is another book of Clare Coleman's that I've read in the past, which, if you've been around for a while, you would know was one of my favourite books of last year. It was the book that surprised me the most last year, and I was just floored by it, and I really had high hopes for Enclave. So although I say that I only gave it 4 stars, like 4 stars is a really good rating. I really, really liked it. It just wasn't as good as Terra Nullius, and I kind of feel like I'd hyped up the author so much that not giving this book 5 stars let me down a little bit, or I let myself down by expecting it to. I'm feeling a little bit negative about my 4-star rating, if that makes sense, even though it's actually a really good rating. And that brings me to my next book, Fantasy of Frost by Kelly St. Clair. So I finally read it. Lana, you will be very happy. I finally read the book and I really, really liked it. So this is a book that Lana from Indie Accords bought me like 2 years ago, and I kept putting it on TBRs and kept not getting it to it. I finally got to it. I finally read it and I really, really enjoyed it. I think part of the reason why I was hesitating a little bit with this one is I was worried that I wasn't going to like it, and then it's one of Lana's favourite books of all time and I didn't want to dislike it on her. But I really liked it, so that works out really well. So this is a fantasy and we follow this young woman. I think she's like late teens, early 20s, and she is part of this one culture in society. In the world, there are 2 kind of islands, I guess, who are kind of like tectonic plates that sit like this next to each other, and they turn kind of like this, like they grind against each other somehow. And the one where this young woman, who was called Olena. So Olena is from the fiery side. So her side is hot, and there are lots of bushfires. There are lots of fiery bushfires and all sorts of different issues with fire. As it turns, the different seasons happen as the land turns, and the royal family move around because in the 4th sector, I think she calls it, it gets too hot and it's basically all on fire, and so they can't live there, but they kind of have to. I didn't really entirely understand that part, to be honest with you. But anyway, we open with there being a what is the word? So we open the book when a delegation from the other country, which is the cold country, so it's kind of opposite to the hot. There are snow and it's very cold. We open as they have come to the hot place, negotiate for a peace treaty. And it's in Elena's point of view, so it's first person. We open with they've been there for a little while, and Elena has been developing a relationship with the prince of this other land, and they are at war. Well, not at war, but like they've always been almost at war. So things aren't great between them, and this is a relationship that nobody would approve of, that would very much not be okay. Now, the other thing to know is that Elena has been made to wear a veil over her face throughout her entire life, and her mother has gone to great lengths to make sure that she never sees her face and no one else ever sees her face. So she's never seen her face, no one has ever seen her face, no one knows what she looks like except her mother. And nobody knows why. She doesn't know why. She assumes she's just horrific to look at. Anyway, so she has this little relationship happening, and then he is actually killed, and she's taken by all of the people who were in this delegation to their land, to the cold land. And then she's kind of held captive, but not really captive, but she's held in the castle by the prince, by the king, who was the prince's brother. It goes from there. And I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well written. I don't know if it's young adult or new adult. I would say it was new adult just because of the age of the characters, but it's definitely not an adult fantasy, I don't think. But it's definitely got some elements of that kind of high epic fantasy. It is set in another world. The races are not necessarily entirely human, they're humanoid. And yeah, like I said, I thought it was really well written. I really enjoyed the way that Kelly St. Clair told the story. I liked the character of Elena. I liked the way she was written. I liked the interactions between the various different characters. I thought all of the characters were well written, well fleshed out. You got a real sense of who they all were. I thought it was something a bit different and interesting. I've never come across something quite like it before. I am very excited to see what's going to happen next. The book ended on quite a cliffhanger, so I'm looking forward to finding out where it goes from there. And yeah, definitely recommend if you're into fantasy. It's relatively short as well and really quite easy to read. It's quite fast paced also, so it's fairly easy to read, very quick to read, and I definitely think it's worth a read. I thought it was really fun, really well done. I gave it an 8 in Core Pile, which is 4.5 stars. So definitely very high rating and very much enjoyed. So I definitely recommend. Like I said, if you like fantasy at all, I think that you're going to like this one. I think that it potentially would be a good bridging as well. If you are a young adult fantasy reader but you'd like to get into adult fantasy, I think this would be a good place to start. But equally, if you are more into adult fantasy but you want to check out some young adult, this might be a good way to bridge into young adult as well. So yeah. And then the final book that I read in the month of May, and the book that I gave the highest rating, was Half a Soul by Olivia Attwater. So this one has been doing the rounds on BookTube quite a bit recently, and most people are speaking pretty highly of it. So I would imagine that most people who are watching this will have come across it or seen it somewhere along the way. But if you haven't, let me tell you about it. So I believe this is the first in a trilogy. We follow a young woman called, why am I so bad with names today? Called Theodora. When Dora was a young girl, about 6, she was an orphan. She was living with her aunt and uncle and cousin. She had a very close relationship with her cousin, who's about the same age as her, Vanessa. One day she ventures into the woods. I can't remember why, but she ventures into the woods and she stumbles across this very strange man. He tells her that he is a lord of fairy, and he then proceeds to take her soul, or try to take her soul. But Vanessa has followed her into the woods, and she comes across this happening, and she's not down with that. She's not okay with that, and she stabs him with these little embroidery scissors that she happens to have been carrying, but they're made of iron, so, or maybe they're made of silver. I don't remember. I think they're made of silver because they're little cute ones, so I think they're silver. But anyway, they're made of one of the things that fairies don't like, because he's a fairy. But he did manage to take half her soul. So throughout the rest of her life, she lives with only half a soul. We then fast forward to when they are late teens, I think, around sort of 18, 19, I believe. It's set in Regency, England, so I always find it difficult to know how old these people are. So I think that they are in their late teens. The aunt is very invested in getting Vanessa married, but she's not very invested in getting Theodora married. She doesn't really like Dora that much. She kind of just puts up with her, but Vanessa absolutely loves Theodora and Theodora loves Vanessa. Now you start to see that Dora, because she only has half a soul, she doesn't experience emotions in the same way that normal people do. She doesn't understand emotions. She doesn't really know why people act the way that they do. She doesn't act the way that she feels like she's supposed to. I have heard from various different sources that Dora is autistic coded, so it's not outright said in the novel that she's autistic. It's said that she has half a soul, but that is coding for autism. From most things that I've heard, this is done quite well. I have heard from own voice reviewers that it is good representation, and that the coding is because of the time period, and that it is done in such a way as to reflect what would have been, how people would have responded to an autistic person in Regency, England. I'm not autistic. I don't know. From an own voices perspective, I don't know about that representation. I thought it was well done. I thought that the way that the author Olivia Attwater characterised Dora and Dora's non-typical way of approaching the world, of thinking about emotions, of experiencing emotions, of acting on emotions or not acting on emotions, was done really, really well. It definitely felt authentic to me, but like I said, I am neurotypical, so I don't know how accurate that is. So yeah, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt from that point of view, but I thought it was done well. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was incredibly well written. I really liked the way that the characters were written. It sort of had a very irreverent kind of feel to it, which I thought was really, really well done. Although you definitely felt for Dora and felt for the characters, and you could see where they were coming from. You could really feel Dora's experiences, and you definitely got taken into her head very effectively. I definitely think the characterization was the strongest part about the book, but I just thought it was lots of fun. I found it really easy to read. I found it really enjoyable to read. I liked Dora as a character. I liked all the characters, the way they were written. Even the characters I didn't really like, I thought were written well. There is a romance, which is a fairly main part of the story, and I thought that was really, really well done. I liked the exploration of romance from a neuroatypical perspective and how that might be different for people who are neuroatypical or not. Like I said, I'm not sure, but yeah, I thought it was really, really well written and really fun. I really, really enjoyed it. It was definitely my favourite book of the month. I gave it a 9 in Coleman, which is a 5-star, so highly recommend, really enjoy it. And if you like any of those types of books, I definitely would recommend. I do think it was fantastic, and I'm really glad that I bought it. It was the book that I bought as my reward, which I was then supposed to read, which I did do. I read it as part of Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany's Patreon. I unfortunately am not going to be able to join in the live show for that because that's at like my 4 in the morning, but I really enjoyed it and I'm really glad that I read it. Yeah. So those are all the books that I've read and how I feel about them. I think it's time now to go over to this bookshelf over here where my whiteboard is for my Diversify Me Game, so we can see how I'm going there and give any points that I get, and then I'll come back and wrap it all up. So let's go do that now. Okay, so Generations was written by Tim Lebbon, who is white, so no lines for BIPOC. There was no LGBTQIA+ rep, so no lines there. I don't think I could say neurodiversity, so no lines there. Nothing really about mental or physical health, so again, no lines there. Not an Australian Aboriginal author, so nothing for that. Written in English, so nothing for translated. It wasn't a comic or graphic novel, it wasn't a short story, it wasn't an arc, and it was not non-European inspired, I wouldn't say. So no lines for Generations. Enclave, however, was written by a BIPOC author. Clare Coleman is an Australian Aboriginal author, so that's a line there. It does have LGBTQIA+ rep. One of their main characters is queer, so that's a line there. Which means that I have gotten 3 lines set, so that means I get to add a magnet. So we will go back to these little pretty ones. However, I don't think there is any neurodiverse rep. Couldn't really say mental or physical health. Clare G. Coleman is an Australian Aboriginal author, so I get a line there. It was written in English, so not translated. Not a comic or graphic novel. Not a short story. Didn't read it as an arc. And I don't think I could say it's non-European inspired. Okay, so although I only read 4 books throughout the month, I still managed not to get any lines in the bad side. And yeah, that's everything that I need to talk to you about today. Please comment below if you've read any of the books that I talked about, what you thought of them, how did you go in May, what did you read, did you enjoy your books, did you not enjoy your books? Let me know all of that in the comments below. If you'd like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me a smiley face emoji because I really enjoyed all the books that I read in the month of May. All of my social media details are listed in the description below, so if you'd like to go follow me on any of those other platforms, please feel free to do so. Anybody that I talked about in this video is of course in the description below, and you should definitely go and check out all of their channels and social media things that I've listed down below because they're all fantastic. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you next time.